Okay, I'd like to call to order the Madison Fire District regular meeting, October 21st, 2020. And it is 7:01 p.m. Call to order. Roll call. Roll call.
Is Nyla on?
Yeah, she's muted. Stand by.
Okay. Yeah, said she's left the meeting. Maybe she'll come back in. Yep.
Fine.
For those of us that might be tuning in this evening via the live stream, in case you're wondering, we're dealing with some quick technical difficulties. The meeting should kick off here momentarily once we get an issue resolved with a phone.
There you go.
Do you hear me now?
Yep, we hear you now. I can't see you.
Oh, excellent. So sorry for the delay.
It's like a Verizon commercial.
Isn't lovely? Isn't technology just so lovely? All righty, here we go then. Roll call. Mr. Adams.
Here.
Mr. Anderson.
Here.
Mr. Gontner.
Here.
Mr. Lee.
Here.
Mr. Vest.
Here.
Mr. Wayman.
Here.
Okay, if we could, we're going to take a moment of silence. Okay, we're going to move on to regular session minutes from the September 16th meeting, 2020. Do we have a motion?
You have that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Vest, a second.
I'll second, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Gontner, discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Adams.
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mr. Gontner.
Yes.
Mr. Lee.
Abstain?
Mr. Vest.
Yes.
Mr. Wayman.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to go on to the bills and payroll for September 2020. Bills, $147,771.96. Payroll, $143,524,083. Total is $291,296.79. Do we have a motion?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Wayman, second.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Anderson, discussion?
Yes, I'll chime in for you, Mr. Adams. The reason the bills are so high is we had the first half of our property liability insurance due, the second half of our dispatching, and then we had the purchase of the radios, which was approved by you back in February.
Thank you, Joanne. And any other discussion? Roll call?
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mr. Gontner.
Yes.
Mr. Lee.
Yes.
Mr. Vest.
Yes.
Mr. Wayman.
Yes.
Mr. Adams.
Yes. Okay, we'll go on to the September 2020 financial report. Joanne?
Okay, I am reading this off the fund summary report. We started September with $5,249,477.65. Our month-to-date revenue was $71,775.48. Our year-to-date revenue is $4,228,702.60. Again, our month-to-date expenditures was $291,296.79. Our year-to-date expenditures is $2,409,091.28. So we are starting September with $5,029,956.34.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, yeah, Joanne, I think did you say month to date was 491? I thought that's what I heard you say. 291?
291.
Okay.
It's 291, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, okay.
Ready for me to continue? I know at the last meeting, you were asking about what we are going to end the year about. My estimated year-end balance by making one of the loan payments, well, I'm estimating like we have $4,127,832. So looks like we're going to end up the year ending, projecting out right now on there. And that's by doing just one loan payment in December. So a couple of other items is you all received the email where I sent out the dollar amount that we received extra in property taxes. As I was just telling the chief earlier today, we're going to be receiving a new laptop next, like February or March from UAN. And I don't know if Chief, if you heard about this, but BWC will be sending us a refund check. I haven't heard the dollar amount yet, by the end of October on there. Next month, we'll have to amend our permanent appropriations, and I also will have to do a transfer of funds for the bond payment due in December. So that'll be coming up next month. And then the chief said he wanted some items that we would discuss later on, and as we're going through after the construction items on budget. That's all I have.
Any questions for Joanne?
No.
Nope.
No questions? Okay, let's move on to the opening public portion. Anything from them?
I have received no email, sir.
Okay, very good. We'll move on to Mrs. Dane. Legal.
Obviously, we have a lot to discuss tonight under old business and new business. I uploaded drafts of all the potential resolutions for the issues that have been brought to my attention. So I think those issues will be more appropriately addressed for each of those items. And I don't have anything else unless the board has anything that they want me to look into.
Anything from Mrs. Dane? No, okay. Let's go on. Any committee reports?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, we will probably be in contact with the two members that are on the healthcare committee from the board. We're in the process called Form Fire every year. That's kind of an evaluation. Everybody, all the employees go through and put their healthcare information in. That will go to, and I completely lost it. You know, our
CBiz?
What's that?
CBiz, is that who you're thinking of?
No, I'm trying to remember the name of their group now. You know, the thing. Anyway, our healthcare broker will get the Form Fire, get it marketed. Hopefully, we'll see the time frame. Hopefully, by the next meeting, we'll have something to talk about. In the meantime, when we get the information, we'll forward it to a couple of board members who are on the healthcare committee so that we can get that stuff wrapped up by year end. And that's all I have for the healthcare.
Okay.
Chief, do you know who the healthcare board members are that are on that committee?
Quite honestly, I'd have to go back to January and see. I can try to keep, or I just diligently go back to look. I can let the board know directly. It's already closed. It's closed. I'll go back to muting. Okay.
Could it be? I was gonna say could be Joanne and Nyla, because is Joanne, is your door closed?
Yes,
No.
I'm muted.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Well, we're gonna go on to the old business. And first thing up is the equipment for virtual meetings. Got anything on that, Chief?
Actually, I do. I muted myself. I'm sorry. One of the things that we looked at doing, and it will come up here later in the chief's piece, is we have been working with the village and the township to identify CARES requests. And I think Mr. Best mentioned at the last meeting, or perhaps the meeting before, that that is a perfect CARES program to get that integration into the classroom. So we did include that in a request that we'll discuss here shortly for the township.
Okay, we'll discuss that in a little bit then. Okay, let's move on to resolution 2023. Stacy, you want to take that?
So as you guys are aware, we opened the bids on September 30th, and all of the bids, there were 3 of them, they all came in at 10%, in excess of 10% of the estimated cost of construction. And so therefore, under the relevant provisions of the Ohio Revised Code, we as a board have no alternative but to reject all of the bids. And the proper way to do that is by passing this resolution. So it would be resolution number 20-23, a resolution rejecting all bids received for the demolition and renovation of the restroom shower room of Station 2 of the Madison Fire District, located at 1743 Hubbard Road, Madison, Ohio, as being in excess of 10% of the estimated cost of construction.
Do we have a motion for that?
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Second, Mr. Lee. Any other discussion on that?
Mr. Chairman, I will want to, when we get a little further down regarding the construction termination of the construction management services, I'll have some comments I want to make regarding this whole thing.
Okay. That's it for there. Okay. Roll call.
Mr. Gauntner,
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Vest,
Yes.
Mr. Wayman,
Yes.
Mr. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just to point out, Joanne, there is a responsibility for you in the resolution to send a copy of this resolution to all of the bidders by certified mail, just so they're on notice that their bids have all been rejected. So I just wanted to point that out to you.
Stacy, do we not have to return the bid bond as well? If they submitted a bid bond or a cashier's check, that would have to be returned also.
Yes.
Okay. Is there any other old business other than what's on here that I'm not seeing? No? Okay. Let's move on to new business. Resolution 2024. Joanne, you want to take that?
Sure. Is a resolution accepting a donation from an anonymous donor in honor of grandchildren's birthday in the amount of $40.00.
Do we have a motion?
Yeah.
Chairman, I still move.
I think I got Mr. Wayman and Mr. Lee.
No,
First
it wasn't Mr. Wayman.
It was me. It was me, Jay.
Sorry. I wasn't looking at the lips that time. My bad.
Well, I'll second Bob's motion then.
Sounds good. Is there a discussion on that? Okay. Roll call.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Vest,
Yes.
Mr. Wayman,
Yes.
Mr. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Gauntner,
Yes.
Okay, let's move on to 2025. Joanne?
Sure, I'll probably mess up the name, but this is
Meshkin Push.
that's what I was thinking. A resolution accepting a donation from M. Meshkinpush, MD, and Dana Meshkinpush in the amount of $500.00, and they specified this to go to EMS equipment.
Do we have a motion?
You have that motion?
Do we have a second?
I'll second it, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Wayman. Discussion. Roll call.
Mr. Vest,
Yes.
Mr. Wayman,
Yes.
Mr. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Gauntner,
Yes.
Mr. Lee.
Yes.
Okay. I think the next one we have coming up is the termination of construction management services. Stacy?
So all of the next resolutions, they were basically talking points for the board's consideration. Nothing that the board has to take action on. We didn't assign numbers to them. I was just trying to be proactive. But I think that the board has to have some discussion tonight as to where we go with the Station 2 renovation project. Do you want to continue the services of Mr. Gates, or do you want to terminate his contract? Under the contract, the fire district can terminate without cause by serving him with notice of the intent to terminate and then letting 14 days expire. So that's an option to us. Obviously, we also had termination provisions for cause or by mutual agreement. So, you know, without having a conversation with Mr. Gates, if that's the pleasure of the board, we can terminate it by the adoption of the resolution that I prepared for you. Send him the notice, and then after the expiration of the 14 days, the contract would terminate. I also prepared a draft of a resolution for request for proposals of qualifications. That, of course, was how we started this whole process. So if the board determined that they were going to terminate the services of Mr. Gates, then where would we go? We would need to start over with the hiring of a construction manager. The board also, I'll remind you, has the opportunity to, instead of a construction manager under certain provisions of the revised code, go through the process of hiring an architect. It's similar, but a little bit different as to the different things that we have to do. So really, I'm just looking for guidance as to where the board wants to go. I know that Mr. Gauntner has some comments that he wants to make on this, and I know that Chief Baker also has some comments that he wants to make on his thoughts. So.
Mr. Gauntner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I was at the bid opening and talked to Mr. Gates extensively there. And then I talked to him this afternoon for about 15 minutes. And he's a very nice man. His expertise is designing buildings and stuff. But this project now is going to fall into the realm of requiring prevailing wage be paid. His original architect's estimate was $60,000, and as Stacy mentioned, we had to reject all the bids because you can't exceed more than 10% of that the architect's estimate by Ohio law. So 66,000 was the magic number, and the lowest bid we got was $74,950. Mr. Gates, and I don't blame that on Mr. Gates necessarily. I talked to the contractors. Actually, I talked to all three contractors. And part of the problem right now is materials are really expensive. They're hard to get. Subcontractors are very hard to get right now, and that's affecting the project. But once the project gets to the $75,000 limit, and we only had one bid under $75,000, and that was probably purpose. The bid number was $74,950. It was $50 under the prevailing wage threshold, and I think that contractor knew that and thought if he bid just under it, he might get the bid. What we're gonna, Mr. Gates admittedly said to me today, I said, have you ever done anything with prevailing wage as far as putting the documents together and what have you? His answer was, I don't even know what prevailing wage is. I'm an architect. I do design buildings. He said, when I did public projects, I usually worked with the construction manager. He mentioned Turner Construction. He said, I did all the drawings. They did all the paperwork and the documentation. So what I would recommend is that we do terminate Mr. Gates' contract and pay him for what he's done. He did remind me that he's been working on this thing for over 6 months and hasn't received a dime. I would like paid for the work he did, which I think is only fair. He should be paid for what he did, but we're going to need to go back to square one. And I think what we do this time is we go out. If you remember, we already had Mr. Gates design the building, then we had to go through the construction manager process. This time, I would think we go out and hire an architect who does the entire drawing plus all the contract documents and does the estimate. We're going to need somebody who's done public projects that's going to be able to kind of come up with a construction estimate based on prevailing wage and the current state of the market, which some of the firms around Lake County that do public projects like Burgess and Nyepel or CT or Then Design, they know what's going on right now in the marketplace. So I would suggest that would be the way we go. And I apologize, my phone is ringing in the background.
Anyone else?
No, I'll have to agree with that. I think we should terminate it and move forward and start all over again.
How much do we owe him right now?
Mr. Chairman, pursuant to the contract, he was entitled to receive for completion of the project a maximum of $2,000. So it was a $400 payout at the completion of each of 5 phases. And at this point, phase 1 started with the entering of the contract with Mr. Gates and was supposed to be completed upon the fire district awarding the bid. So technically, I think in good faith, we would pay him for that first phase, even though it hasn't been fully completed, and pay the $400.
Yeah.
So I pulled up in the computer and this year I paid $1,161.70.
That would have been for the architectural drawing.
Right. So
This
that
is
way,
under a separate contract.
I knew somebody asked how much we paid him so far, so yes, there you go.
Okay. Any other discussion on that? So we're looking for a motion then for this?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to adopt, I guess it would be resolution 20-26, terminating construction management services contract.
I'll make a second.
No other discussion? A roll call?
Mr. Wayman,
Yes.
Mr. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Gontner,
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Vest.
Yes.
Okay. Well, we'll go on to the next one then, Stacy.
So, I mean, the one that I prepared this time was following the same procedure. So it does reference the construction management services in the prepared draft. If it's the pleasure of the board instead to pursue it under an architect and to go that right under the statute, then we'll just need to amend it before we go ahead and adopt it. So is that what the board would like to do?
Discussion on that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and Chief, I hope you and I had a discussion this afternoon, so you may want to weigh in on this. But I'll give you my 2 cents worth. Based on where we're going with this thing, we're looking now probably something that's more like $90,000 by the time you get in the prevailing wage. We hope to keep it way under the prevailing wage law limit, but that's not going to happen. And I think the chief and I had a discussion, and I'll let him reiterate, but I think maybe we know we have a pretty nice carryover in Station 2, which was built in 1955 and had an addition in 1966 or 67, was never designed to be a 24/7 facility. We've managed to make do with it for a number of years, but I know Stacy and I had a discussion. It's really not a good situation. The housing there, as far as housing and the bathrooms, the whole bit. And the chief came up with an idea that we may want to actually expand this a little bit more and do more than just the bathroom. So Chief, I'll let you talk about that.
Well, when I talked to Mr. Gautner, Mr. Adams, I mentioned it to you. One of the things that I think the station has several obstacles. Living space, as Mr. Gautner brought up, wasn't designed for what we use it for. We've identified bathroom issues. There's some common sleeping issues.
Hey, I'm having a problem understanding what the chief is saying.
Did I? Okay, how about now?
Good. Well, I know how about now.
Okay.
Continue on.
Okay, so that station was never designed. I think it's, Joanne, can you turn your volume down next door? I think it's reverbing from over there. I think it's time, when we looked at a simple bathroom, and we were looking at simple dollars, it made sense. I think if we're beginning to get to bigger pieces, the bathroom is one issue. There's some sleeping quarter issues. The size of the kitchen is significantly compromised. And one of the things that we had talked about from an officer and staff standpoint is, how do you make that work? We obviously can't afford to build a $3 million station. But since we're crossing that threshold of prevailing wage, and now it is what it is, one of the things that I think, before we jump right back, we jumped into this thing, now this is the second time with the bathroom, maybe it's time to think about taking one big chomp at it. And one of the things that I would suggest, and maybe we do it in a workshop, is have discussion about adding a 12-foot addition off the backside. Maybe we do the bathroom, and off the backside we add 4 individual private sleeping quarters. Doesn't get complicated with plumbing, some pretty basic electrical. It moves 3 people sleeping in one room into private rooms, which again avoids some of the potential liability. And I know now is the bad time with price and labor cost, but the other thing is it might make it more enticing to multiple bidders because it's a little bigger job. And if we added an addition off the back and we got some sleeping quarters, that eases the burden in the kitchen, and that might buy us 10 or 15 more years with a fire station that really is compromised currently. So the only thing that I would ask is maybe some consideration whether now is the time to move forward. As Joanne told us in the report, fiscally today we're good. We obviously have some challenges in the future, but I think remedying the sleeping and bathroom issues at Station 2 gives us more ammunition if and when the time comes to go back to the voters, because we're trying to accommodate for the firefighters, reduce liability, and ultimately ease that burden that is Station 2. Did I sum it up okay, Mr. Gautner?
Yeah, Chief, you did. That's exactly what we talked about, and I think that's really the way we should go. It's not a good the sleeping situation isn't good there. The bathroom situation isn't good there, and like you and I talked, it doesn't have to be a brick. We can go on the back of the building, and it doesn't have to be a brick addition. We can save some money that way. And if it's just sleeping quarters and not a lot of plumbing, we might be able to get away with overall. I'm hoping 200,000, something like that. But until you get an architect in there to design it and put a number to it, we're not going to know. But I think now's the time to do it. We've got the money, and the situation there is not good, and it is there's some potential liability if we don't do something a little better.
And I guess that was the time to ask the question. If we're going to jump into this again, now would be the time to ask that question. What would the cost be? And is it a cost that's palatable?
I think Mr. Vest had something.
I do.
Go ahead.
I'm fine with what's going in this direction. I don't know if tonight's the night for us to move forward. It sounds like we don't have any finite plans. We seem to have a lot of ideas. So therefore, to go forward tonight and say that we're going to hire an architect for something that we're not sure what we're going to do, I think we need to do a little bit of investigation before we go forward. any further. Just in my opinion, that's what I don't want is to do the proverbial lipstick on a pig. Okay, that's not what we're looking for here. Well, that's where I'm at.
And
Mr.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Go ahead,
can,
Mr. Dame.
we wouldn't, if that's the direction that the board wants to go, we wouldn't be adopting this resolution tonight. As I indicated, the code sections are different, and we're going to have to draft amended requests for proposals because we have to adjust the timeline. If that's the scope of the project that we're looking at, we have to define it a little bit better before we'd actually authorize that advertisement.
Yep, absolutely, Stacy. I would be willing, and Mark, I agree. If anything, maybe we should, I know we're doing this virtually, but this may require a face-to-face workshop where we sit down and kick the idea around and then go out and decide how to do it. But I wrote a lot of RFPs for architects back in the day. I'd be willing to help Stacy with that. I even got some rough drafts of stuff I used many, many years ago. But yeah, it's not something we're going to be able to solve tonight, but we do need to have some more discussion on it, potentially in a workshop.
And one other thing, Mr. Butner, also is to be able to, let's examine our budget, see what our budget can be, what can we afford, and how far can we go with this thing. I mean, we have rough drafts. I mean, I'm sure Todd's got a handle on that, but let's get some real numbers as to what we can afford. And if not, is financing an option? If we're going to do this, let's look at all options.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
And Mr. Chair, I just brought that up because I know if we adopt an we do the amendment today, now's the time to look at, do we want to go right back to the bathroom or do we want to look at something else? I totally agree with Miss Dame.
Hey, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Maybe we could have the workshop at Station 2, so we could, as we're talking and guesstimating, we can actually see, how it might evolve.
Agree.
Anyone else? I'm good.
Well, Mr. Chairman, when would you want to do the workshop? I agree with Bob. I think doing it at Station 2 would be a good idea.
I think we'd want to do it as soon as possible. We've been putting this off for how long? So this is something we're going to have to address sooner than later. No matter what direction we go, I mean, this needs to be addressed. I mean, we have what, three females in this, in this department, and we have guys and the girls sleeping together. I mean, at some point in time, I mean, it's, not 1970 anymore. We have to separate the two and, protect everybody. So
I agree.
Sooner than later, I would suggest.
You put that very tactfully, Jay. Well, I know we may have to do something a little later in the meeting, Chief, with some purchases. Maybe, of course, we were going to do that virtually, I guess. It'd be nice to do it within the next week or two if we can find a time that's convenient for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, any evening for me, not during the morning hours, is no good. So
my schedule's pretty open. Don't have a lot going on, and our next trustees meeting's a noon meeting, so we don't have any trustees meetings in the evening over the next 2 weeks.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a recommendation that maybe we cross the bridge at a special meeting or a workshop as we progress through some of these other resolutions that are on the table?
Yeah.
Does that work, Ms. Dame?
Certainly would.
Okay. So moving on. I guess we're going to move on to the signers. Is that where we want to move on to?
Yes.
Okay.
This is an issue that was brought up to me by the chief, and I can let him speak to it. But if you'll recall, a few years ago, we added through a resolution a provision that we had the fire chief act as a secondary signer to checks that already were reviewed and approved by the fiscal officer, just as a check and balance, and also to make the auditor happy. And it came to light, when the chief had to take some time off recently, that became problematic when he wasn't at the station, and a secondary signer needed to act on those checks. And so we talked about whether it'd be a good idea to have a stamp. And I think that opens the door for abuse. And it's hard to keep people accountable when you have just a stamp with the chief's name on it. And so I suggested to him that if there were individuals that he wanted to propose to the board to add as, alternate secretary or secondary signers when he's not available, and he indicated that he would like the captains to have that authority in his absence, then that's where this draft of the resolution came up and is for your consideration. So.
Any
And
other
I think it also
discussion?
helps with succession. Not that I'm leaving yet.
We know.
There I am. Okay, question for this. In ways I'm comfortable, and I mean this not in any means to insult or question honesty or trustworthiness or anything. I don't like too many signers. If we were to go to this avenue, I would feel more comfortable that if they were going to go down another level of signees from chief to captain, that I would like to have at least 2 signees as opposed to 1.
Mr. Vest, there's already 2 signees. So before the chief actually signs, Joanne has already reviewed, approved, and signed the checks. And so the chief is actually just a check and balance on the fiscal officer. So this would only be in the absence of the chief as the second person, be one of the captains. So it would still be Joanne and the chief most of the time. It's just in the chief's absence or unavailability. I mean, what if Todd, got sick or was hospitalized? We'd have the same issue and, have to address it.
So
but there's already 1 signer. That's Joanne.
Yeah,
Okay,
actually, just let me touch base too. I touched it with the chief. There is actually 2 more signers on the account. It's the board members.
Right, exactly. So my question to you would be, Stacy, then so what it is Joanne and a captain, correct? Is the way it would go. Okay, very good. I just wanted to make sure there was 2 signees.
Yeah.
The only reason the board adopted that in 2017 was because it was set up so that it's the board as the signers, and the board didn't want to keep coming in or having to sign the checks. And since the fire chief was there, you designated him as the board's representative. And so he is, kind of taking the place of a board member having to go in and be the second signer on those checks that Joanne's already signed. So this is just designating another alternative, representative for the board.
And ultimately, the responsibility still falls on the chief, correct?
Well, I think ultimately it would fall on the board, but that tracing and that concern is why I was opposed to a stamp where we don't have someone's actual signature and we can't account for who actually signed, the.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
So we understand our process as well. So we, myself or a captain, approve all bills before Joanne pays them. And then essentially Joanne cuts the check is signed by Joanne, and then either what I'm proposing is either myself, Captain Meister, or Captain Sopko then are the secondary signature for Joanne. So that almost closes the loop all the way back around from the bill to the check, to give us loop closure.
But just to clarify, if you're available, chief, you're the second signer. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So ultimately, it's you're gonna designate the alternate signee, correct?
Yes.
at that time. When you leave, whoever second next in charge is the signee, correct?
Yeah, and in this case, when I was off for 2.5 weeks or so, that would have enabled Captain Sopko to come in and sign off on something so that I didn't have to. So Joanne didn't have to either bother you, or I didn't have to make time to come in and sign checks.
Okay, so
I
could
will
you,
still primarily be 95% of the check signer.
so the only other question, could you explain please where and in what capacity you end up having the difficulties when you were in your absence?
Well,
What instances did we have?
So payroll, for instance,
Okay,
somebody has to sign off on payroll. There are still several things like our insurance, and non-routine vendors that get checks. So instead of processing them quickly to mail, I had to make special times to stop in and, for instance, I signed each one of your paychecks. So it really depends upon the time of the month and what bills are there. There may be times when it's not needed, but there may be times where, if it's payroll week and I'm sick, there may be times where somebody else has to do the secondary signature.
thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Yes, we have one employee that is really stuck, besides board members, that is stuck on a check for payroll.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a point of clarification. So in this 2.5 week period, Chief, could the board member have been the second sign?
I believe so, correct, Joanne?
Yes. Yes, I could, yes.
Yes.
Oh, so I mean, then you really didn't have to come in if
In a sense, I was designated in the position to sign as the second signator, in lieu of having the board, come in. You're right. A board member could have been called to come in.
because I guess I'm wondering if now we have, if you're unavailable, then either of the captains, or no, one of the captains whom you will designate is the second signature.
Correct.
Then what about the two board members that are also on the checking account? Should they continue or not?
I would strongly suggest they would be continued.
It's my understanding that under the applicable statutes or the regulations that it's supposed to be the board members and the fiscal officer. And the only reason that we did that originally was to alleviate that for the board members and to have the fire chief, who was more familiar with the day-to-day operations, sign the everyday checks and expenses and payroll and that sort of thing.
Well, I guess then I'm going to just back up that, I would think the chief has not been unavailable, probably only this one time. And so we have it, we don't have to pass a new resolution. We have it in policy form or resolution form that one of the board members can be the second signature on the check. So why do we have to pass this resolution and bring two more people into this whole situation?
You don't have to pass the resolution. This was just brought up, given the scenario, as something potentially we hadn't thought of. And I think the chief was looking at it not so much for this most recent scenario, but what if something did happen, or what if he became, unavailable, like I said, whether he was hospitalized and, he was asking whether the board wanted to open up to the captains, and that's why the draft was presented. But the board does not have to take action. We haven't assigned a resolution number. We don't have to do this if it's not the board's pleasure.
And that's the only reason I brought it up to Stacy, was with what we went through. And the other thing is, I always am looking downstream for succession as well. So at some point, one of these other two gentlemen are going to be in that role, and that's one less thing that we have to quickly change at some point in time. But it doesn't have to be passed. It was just merely a suggestion from an operational standpoint.
I believe that they should be part of this because they will be at some point in time, I would think, part of the day-to-day operation. So I think they should see the ins and outs of this, the budget. That's huge, you know. Yeah, we see the, you know, we see the bottom line here, but as captains, I mean, they're administrators too. You know, I think they're the ones that are next in line. They need to see what's coming and going in that department. I think that's very important. I don't think they should rely on, you know, Todd just to tell them, hey, we spent whatever, you know, 50,000 this week. To them, that's nothing, you know, that's just a number. But when they have to sign for it every day, you know, they look at it a little bit. I know I do. I know I look at this budget and be like, you know, and I'm a police officer and I know we spend a lot, but I don't know until I get the actual numbers or I have to sign a check or something like that to say, wow, we're spending a lot here or there or wherever. I just think that's very important. I think that's, you know, part of their training. So that's just my take on it. Anyone else? Nothing?
Jay, I can go either way with it. I hear Bob's side and I also hear your side. To me, you know, it doesn't hurt to have those guys sign. The question that came to my mind though is who's the board member then? Is it the chairman of the board that signs, or is it any one of us six, or is it the chairman or vice chairman?
I think we have it designated who it was.
Yeah, and Mr. Adams is one for sure. And I think it might still be Mr. Vess. I'd have to contact them and ask. But I definitely know Mr. Adams is one.
This way we would definitely know who the three are.
Yeah. Yeah, to me, it doesn't matter. I can go either way with it. I just didn't know who the designated board member was.
And this was just a consideration based on experience.
And I don't have a problem with that. It's just, you know, in reading the resolution that Stacy's put together, it says that the fire district desires to designate the captains as an alternate signature, a secondary signer in the absence or unavailability of the fire chief. You could be out of the office in downtown Cleveland at a meeting. Does that mean you're unavailable or absent?
No, I think in my opinion, when I sent an email that let you guys know that I was going to be gone for a while,
right?
I'm routinely here 2 out of 3 days, if not more than that. I think this was just designed to give us and hopefully my bad luck has stopped. But this was just to kind of give a parachute for, you know, I have some vacation time coming up. I can tell you in the next several months here, I will be gone quite a bit to use vacation. This gives an option for the captains to continue. They're approving the bills. They're approving the electronic fund transfers. They're already involved. This is just one last step that pretty much closes that loop. But I don't see it as a routine thing. I see it as an emergency. You know, an emergency occurs, we have something in place that allows us to continue the operation.
And I stand corrected. It's Mr. Adams and Mr. Wayman are the signers besides the chief.
So, who does Joanne get in touch with? Okay, what you're saying, Chief, is that you will notify Joanne and I would imagine the chairperson of the board, as to your unavailability and that there's going to have to be someone else signing some checks. Now, will it be up to Joanne as to which of the two captains she calls, or will she get that direction from you?
No, she'll get that from me. For instance, when I left, I knew Captain Sopko was going to be around. So if I say I had to leave for my family emergency and Captain Sopko happened to be on vacation, then I would send an email out to the board and to Joanne and Nyla and the staff that says, in my absence, Captain Meister will be acting in that role. So if that was the case, it would be Captain Meister who would be signing the checks. In this case, when I left, as you know, I let you know that Captain Sopko was going to be available. So in that case, Captain Sopko would be the one that stepped in then to fill those, to sign those checks. Again, I think that, other than vacation, I'm hoping that I don't have to use this, but I also think that this kind of exposed that there is some preparedness things that we can do. And, if I drop over dead tomorrow and they're already designees, then this place continues to operate in my absence, as opposed to having to go through and wait and pass a resolution and get somebody else to sign or have a board member come in and sign. Because no offense intended to the board, I think the captains probably do have a little better day-to-day understanding of where our money goes. And again, if the board's uncomfortable, I absolutely understand. I was just looking for something that, I identified what I felt was a deficit. I thought this might be a way that we could plug a hole. But it is entirely up to the comfort of the board.
Now, hey, Chief, I mean, we have to rely on you because you are the day-to-day chief of the fire district. And so if you feel, based on your involvement, that this would overcome a potential problem area, then I, for one, am going to say that's why you're the chief, and you make recommendations to the board. And as long as we do not see that there is any creation of any kind of other issues based on what we're addressing here, then I, for one, say I've got to go along with your recommendation.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Mr. Vest.
Okay, the only thing I'd have is potentially with the legislation, I'm sorry, with the resolution being presented before us, that maybe it goes to more of a attritionary type system to where he would call, say, the board members first, and then the captains if the board members are not available.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead, Stacy.
I was going to, before Mr. Vest spoke, I was going to address the issue that Mr. Lee brought up, but it also addresses the concern that Mr. Vest has. I mean, we can modify the resolution to provide that it would be an alternative or secondary signer in the event of an emergency, vacation, or illness causing an extended absence of the fire chief, where he would notify the chairperson and the board of his unavailability and designate a captain to act in that capacity. And, to your end, if you want him to go to the board first, we can do that before he would go to the captain. It would fit right in there.
I like what Stacy said. It's up to you, Mark.
Well, it's fine with me either way. If the board is comfortable the other way, I was just throwing out another suggestion to allow all parties concerned to be satisfied.
I like the way you have it, Stacy. I like the way it's.
Okay.
Do you want the board to be first or just the chief to designate? Because if he contacts the board, the chairman, and you indicate that you want to act as the signer, then it would stop there. It wouldn't even go any further as to him designating. So that's kind of already built in.
Fine and dandy.
Okay.
Good.
Is it up to Mr. Vest?
Okay. We're
So,
gonna make,
Mr. Chairman, you need a motion to adopt resolution 2027?
yes,
As
I will
amended,
make, as amended by Stacy, but based on the language she just read to us, I'll make a motion to adopt resolution 2027.
And a second.
second, Mr. Vest.
I'll second.
Roll call?
Yeah, hang on.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Gontner,
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
yes,
Mr. Vest,
Yes.
Mr. Wayman,
Yes.
Mr. Adams.
Yes.
Mr. Adams,
Yes.
something's come up and I have to leave, so I'm going to get out of the meeting.
Okay, Mr. Wayman. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
if I may request of Stacy, could you email this amended resolution to the board so that
Absolutely.
we know exactly what we passed?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think we're going to go on to the vehicle maintenance of 2113. You want to jump in there, Chief?
Sure. In lieu of my experience with Miss Dame, one of the things that she recommended several years ago when I first started was at times when we did have pricey repairs or maintenance done to the vehicles, to have it, I can't remember the word, that marked in history with a resolution. So one of the things that I wanted to bring before the board is we did have fire engine 2113, which is one of our sisters that we bought 13 years ago. In the interest of preserving the truck to get longevity, and because of some significant corrosion that was causing further damage, we just had some modifications done to the back. I don't know how much you guys know about steel, but there's something called dissimilar steel, and when you put aluminum and stainless steel together over a period of time, they don't like each other. And we had some serious corrosion problems on the back of the truck, exterior. We worked with Countryside, discussed options. We were going to go with stainless steel to replace the aluminum until we saw the price of stainless steel. And after talking to Countryside, opted to replace the aluminum that was there with aluminum, reseal the difference between the two. The logic is that we made it 13 years with it the way it is. So we just had it in for service, preventative maintenance, and they just did the modifications where they pulled all the plating off the back and off the top. I think I showed you guys the pictures of it. I think I put it in a board folder a while back. It was terrible. And the truck is returned. It looks beautiful. We got our bill. The bill was $9,333. I asked Stacy, is it worth having a resolution again as we did in the past? And I think her recommendation was yes, because there's one there. So that resolution is just to agree to and make the payment for the work that was performed. And we're going to get ready to do the same thing to the second truck. That way these trucks hopefully will get us through the time we need to get the replacements. This kind of piggybacks on the big bite that we took 3 years ago. And I'd be happy to answer anybody's questions.
Any questions for the chief?
What was that cost again, Chief?
It was $93.33 and some pennies.
97.
97.
So 3 years ago, we had the whole underside cleaned, undercoated. We replaced a bunch of things that needed work. Our preventative maintenance has been significantly lower the last couple of years. And if you recall, a couple months ago, I said we had a couple more big bills, and these are those big bills. This should be the end. I don't know what else could corrode, but this will extend the longevity of the vehicles.
Okay. Do we have a motion for this?
I'll
So
make a
moved.
motion 20, 28?
Yep.
For the vehicle maintenance. I'm sorry?
Go on.
Go ahead.
No, you're going 2028. Yep.
For the vehicle maintenance expenditures. I have no problem.
Do we have a second?
Second,
Mr. Lee,
yes.
roll call.
Mr. Godner.
I had to unmute myself. Thank you. Yes. I'm sorry. I was trying to second, but I realized I was muted. Never mind.
Mr. Gontner,
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Vest,
You're muted, Mr. Best.
Mr. Vest, Mr. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
and Mr. Vest.
Yes.
Thank you.
All righty. Okay.
Can't mute that guy for long, can we?
Nope.
Let's go on to the next one, which is the Life Pack, Chief.
Yes. As I'll talk about in the chief's report, one of the things we worked on was some requests for CARES money. And in doing some of the groundwork for that, one of the things that we identified is our LifePack 15 monitors. Two of them are from 2009, one is from 2010. This was going to be a budget item 2021 because we need to start replacing some of this capital equipment. In doing research for the CARES funds, one of the things that we identified, apparently Stryker Medical in the beginning of 2020 was not selling anything. The company decided that they were going to make an offer for the duration of 2020 to its loyal customers, of which Madison is one, to do a trade-in to upgrade people to the new version. LifePack monitors lifespan is 8 to 10 years, and we are at the end. The list price for these devices is $36,000. The state bid price is $31,000. I just recently found out they have a special where they will take our old 2009, which they can't warrant anymore, for trade-in, and we can buy a brand new monitor for $22,200 and some odd dollars. Again, this is not something that was a budget item 2020. It was going to be a budget item 2021. In 2021, that potentially cost us $36,000. We have an opportunity now because of the sale to replace one of our old monitors for $22,200, and Stacy, I know, has the number. I'm not sure if the board has a pleasure in discussion. I know we have unappropriated money. We decided that we weren't capitalizing some after looking at the budget and our carryover potentially and some of the things that we want to do. I would make a recommendation to the board that we capitalize on an opportunity to replace a 2009 monitor with a 2020 monitor that gives 10 more years at a significantly reduced cost.
The savings from the figure for the 36,000 to what Stacy has on the resolution is $13,715.46.
Yes, and the state bid price is $31,600, so the savings is just under $10,000. This offer will not be available to us in 2021 when we had made plans to put that in the budget.
Question.
Yes, sir.
You indicated we have two. One was purchased in 2009 and the other one in 2010?
We actually have four.
Oh.
We have two that were purchased in 2009, one that was purchased in 2010, and a fourth one that I believe was purchased in 2015. The three of them are at their life cycle and are going to, one way or the other, we're going to need to make purchases.
So
go ahead.
So we're saving 10,000 on one of ours.
Correct.
Could we save 10,000 on the second one that was purchased in 2009? Or did they only offer the sale for one life pack?
Well, when we get to talking about the care shortly, I think that problem will resolve itself. If that makes sense.
Okay, I'll wait.
We are going to make a CARES request to purchase 2 additional monitors through township funds. That's one of the things we're going to talk about.
Okay, that's right. I saw something on.
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Mr. Best.
So this is not, I know through CARES funds and such as this is not something that is budgeted for this year, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. All right. Very good. That's it. I know you can't do that. So very good. Thank you.
So I guess the question is, we can act now, and I know it was unplanned. I feel comfortable with the unappropriated monies. If we don't act today, I will tell you that you will see the $30-some thousand in request in the 2021 budget, because we are going to need to replace the monitor. Right now we get a 1-year warranty. They won't warrant it for more than that, because if one of the motherboards goes, it can't be repaired.
Okay.
Anybody else have questions?
Anything else for Chief?
No. I'm ready to make a motion, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
I'll so move to adopt resolution 2029, purchase Life Pack 15.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Anderson, second. Roll call.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Vest,
Yes.
Mr. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Gontner,
Yes.
Okay.
For the last one, Stacy,
What was that?
do you want me to tackle the last one?
Yes.
Go ahead, Chief.
So the last ask of the evening is, when we purchased the vehicle, the new Dodge Ram, one of the things that we had talked about was the snow plow. The truck has been purchased, outfitted. We did go out and find pricing. Eshelman's out of Mentor was the best price. That's where we purchased the one 3 years ago. And this will complete giving Station 2 that basically all season utility type vehicle. Eshelman's has an 8-foot plow. It has the wings. The cost complete for us is $4,500. In comparison, in 3 years ago, when we purchased the snowplow for the truck at Station 3, we spent $42,000. And the one thing that I want to point out is, if some of the older board members recall, we were spending $7,000 a year in snow plowing. For 3 years, we've managed it ourselves. Station 2 has been dependent on the township, who has done a good job. I think this gives that truck a little more, makes it a little more of an asset for the department. So that $4,500 is the request to put a new plow on the new 2127, which is the new Dodge Ram.
Any questions for Chief?
What brand name was the plow, Chief?
It is, what's that?
The brand name?
Stand by one moment.
I think it's
Snow Dog.
Snow Dog.
HD 80.
Right.
This is the identical
well
plow
needed.
on the other one.
All right. I think it's well needed, and I have no problem with getting another snowplow for down at Station 2. By the time you go back and forth from the other one, time is important, especially when you need to get them units out of there and the snow's coming in. You know, it needs to be clean. So I'd like to make a motion on resolution 2030 for a new snowplow for $4,500.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Lee. Discussion. Nothing else? Roll call.
Mr. Vest,
Yes.
Mr. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Gontner,
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Okay. Let's go on to the chief's report.
All right, in the interest of time, I apologize. There was a lot to cover this month. Anniversaries, I want to recognize firefighter Scott Rowe for completing his 17th year with Madison. The budget overview that Joanne went through September, things look pretty good. As she mentioned, our tax revenue was slightly above what was projected. We are slightly behind in the last 2 months. We've dropped a little bit off on our EMS revenue. We're down about 2.2%, which is about $11,000. I went back and reviewed the runs. We're down about 76 EMS runs for the year. So being down that volume of runs and that little bit of revenue was kind of optimistic because our average revenue per call has increased. Some of the other budget concerns that we mentioned before, sick time. We virtually had a full-time guy off on some type of sick leave up until August. So that's been a little above what's projected. Staffing has continued to be somewhat challenging. We've made some modifications by adding some dedicated part-time people who we plug into shifts. And what we're going to try to look at is addressing the ebbs and flows. Some days there's 8 people, some days there's 5, and some days 5 people requires overtime. So some of the modifications that the officers have talked about and that we made was adding dedicated people to try to flatten the curves. I think Captain Meister brought up budgets, and one of the things that we will probably propose to you, well, I know we will propose to you at the next meeting, is augmenting staffing some if the budget supports it by looking at full-time staff and part-time staff. And in polling up the officers here, I think it's more important that we have consistency than it is having numbers. Having 8 on one day and 5 on the next is not beneficial. We need to figure out how to have 6 or 7 people every day to provide a consistent service to the community. So you'll probably see some emails from me between this meeting and next meeting. Call volume, I will tell you our volume I think has been up. Mental health, overdoses, I talked to Mr. Adams about it from the Painesville side. We're seeing a little different fluctuation in calls and probably seeing more of the mental health and overdoses. We're not seeing as many COVID patients. We're getting about 4 notifications a week for Madison, like 4 cases per week. Fire inspections are really unchanged. We talked about the vehicles already. So you are aware, we did cancel the October officers meeting. That was kind of in the throes of my own family situation. And again, we started the use of Form Fire in the healthcare group. So we hope to have some prices back. There is one other issue that's been pressing, and I apologize because I didn't mention this to Ms. Dame earlier. I think one of the things that we need to discuss as a fire district is private fire hydrants. I'm not sure what happened suddenly, but suddenly there's been a lot of conversation about the care and maintenance of private fire hydrants. And I say I apologize to Ms. Dame because this is probably something that will land back on her desk. But we've had at least one, actually we've talked to 2 different private groups, one being Chapel Cove and one being by the Y.
Sweetbriar?
No, the new development right south of the Y. And I apologize, I can't think of the name. Both are private communities, both have HOAs, both have private hydrants, and both have questions as to what we're going to do. And now that I mention it, the third one and the one that brought this all to light is James Place. So we flushed James Place a while back. They were very upset at the water bill that they got because we flushed fire hydrants. And, you know, under the Ohio Fire Code, there are things that we're required to do. We have flushed private hydrants in the past. We're going to be sending letters out that if we're not flushing them, they need to flush them and provide us documentation. But what that actually raised was a Stacy question. If it is a private fire hydrant and they're asking that the Madison Fire District perform the maintenance, where does the liability fall if the fire hydrant breaks during that preventative maintenance? If a water line breaks, opening and closing the fire hydrant, who is liable? Because I can certainly see an HOA when they see a $10,000 or $15,000 repair bill coming to the fire board. And I'm actually surprised that none of the fire board members have been approached yet. But I think we need to figure out what as a board of trustees you would like us to do. We would be happy to do the care and maintenance and flush them. But I almost think that we need to have some kind of signed contract with these, Walmart is another example. There are a lot of private fire hydrants in the community. And if we're going to take the responsibility to do the maintenance, we probably need to have some indemnity clause or contract or something to release us from liability. And Ms. Dame, I don't know whether we're going down the right rabbit hole here or not.
Well, I mean, that would be my first thought when you started talking about where does the liability fall. I was going to ask you, do we have any sort of agreement in place as to whether we can actually do that or not? That's what I'd have to look further into just to make sure there's nothing in any applicable section that would prohibit us from doing that. But I'll definitely look into it and report back.
Mr. Chairman, if I could. Yeah, Chief, one of the board members has been approached. I was approached about a week ago by Ned Foley, who is one of the board members at Chapel Cove, about this very issue and wanted to know if the fire department flushed the hydrants. And my answer to him, and it may have been incorrect, was the only people I've seen flushing hydrants now are the Lake County Utilities Department. They notify us. I didn't know the fire department was doing it. I said, contact utilities because they send us a list all the time where they're going to be in town flushing hydrants. And I know they were doing them up in the village too. So is the fire district and the utilities department both flushing hydrants, or?
So they don't flush hydrants. They do their flow testing and they'll flush dead end hydrants. Every year this year we did not because of COVID, but every year the fire department flushes every fire hydrant in Madison Township. We open them up, let them run, make sure they drain, lubricate the caps, identify, if there's a leak in the drain or they don't drain or a crack in the base or a stem's broken. We report that back to Lake County Utilities, who then comes out and does the repairs. We have never done the village, but are assuming that we are going to take over doing the village because Lake County Utilities doesn't flush the fire hydrants. I mean, I'm not saying that as a shot at, but they depend on us to do I don't know, Captain Sopko, I think there's about 1,100 of them. Something like that. So the question was, we did do Chapel Cove the last 2 or 3 years. I know Captain Sopko gave Mr. Armstrong and Mr. Richmond both the dates that they were flushed. But when James Place had concerns about the water bill, that's when we began to have discussions about liability and, well, what if they're newer hydrants, but what if we shut down a hydrant and a water line blows in a neighborhood that is private, that is managed by an HOA? And what do we have to protect ourselves from being culpable to making those repairs? And the answer is right now, nothing.
What do we do in Sahara? They have fire hydrants, don't they?
No.
They don't?
No, there's no fire hydrants in Sahara.
Wow.
We need a lot of hose.
Oh, wow. So you got to tie into the hydrants out on 20 and run them all the way back, or pumper truck.
Yeah.
So James Place is the only mobile home park with hydrants in it.
Yeah. So, but
Correct.
again, now we're getting these private communities, Chapel Cove, whatever Bear Path or whatever that is in the village.
Madison Preserve.
Madison, yeah. So I think we need to identify. I don't know whether there's an obligation by law that we have to do them because they're private. And number two, if we do them, if the board feels that it's in our best interest to do them, which I don't necessarily disagree with, having some kind of contract that's entered into with responsible parties so that we minimize our liability and, potentially big dollars. Cap Sopko, do you have anything to add? Did I hit everything?
Yeah, I mean, there's law in the fire code that says, okay, if you don't want us touching them, you have the obligation to do them. But, I think that is something, like you said, that was brought to light. Okay, if we go to Walmart, flush their hydrants, and we break their main, who's fixing it?
Camp Sopco, I know you're familiar with Paynesville, obviously. How does the city of Paynesville treat that? Do you have any special document you use, or you don't have any situations like this there?
Well, the city of Paynesville, they have their own water department, and there is a clause in the water department ordinance that any private hydrant, they pay like $25 a month, and it is maintained by the city. So here it's totally different. I mean, Lake County Utilities does not do anything with private hydrants. So therefore, the maintenance is either on us or it's on the owner of the private hydrant.
Okay, that makes sense.
Question, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Mr. Vest.
I believe in our agreement with the county, with our water taking over, I brought this up on several occasions that that was going to be part of the agreement, that they were going to do the flushing of the hydrants. So I don't know if that's being overlooked now, but I know I brought it up on a couple of occasions and was reassured on a couple of occasions that that was what was going to happen.
I may contact you to get a copy of that.
Well, the only thing that you need to clarify as far as flushing, they do conduct dead end flushing, which is basically, you know, the farthest point of that line, and they do it to bring the chlorine levels up. So, you know, I would just clarify whether it's every single fire hydrant or if it's dead end mains.
Okay.
Could we get a copy of that contract, Mr. Best?
A copy of that contract? Why, certainly you can.
Thank you, sir.
Public record.
I would also like to see the provisions of the fire code that you guys are referencing, just because you can pinpoint that directly and save me some time and having to search through the fire code on it. And then I can look at other provisions of the revised code.
I will have it to you tomorrow morning.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Terry. We don't have to make a decision necessarily what to do because that we're beyond that season, but I think in 2021, if we are going to move into the private hydrant business, I think Captain Sopko and my recommendation were that we come up with something that specifically outlines in his assigned agreement. And other than that, Mr. Chairman, I'm probably just tired and forgetting something, but I think those are the pressing issues of the day, unless you have something to remind me of, Ms. Dame.
I do. You're neglecting to discuss the CARES Act.
Oh my goodness. See, that's why we pay her well. Yes, the last piece is the CARES Act, and I think the village council members, I think, are aware. I believe the village council, and I got an agreement that was forwarded to Ms. Dame, and I believe it's in the board folder, has agreed to reimburse for the cost of one Lucas device, which is a CPR machine. I do have a letter that was placed in both folders to submit to both with a request for a Lucas device from, or reimbursement for a Lucas device from the village and the township. We were going to ask, oh, and Mr. Lee's not here. We were going to ask for the purchase of 2 new LifePak 15 monitors so that we could augment our fleet. And the second component to the township ask was the $6,220 some dollar upgrade to our meeting room here because of COVID that allowed us to do virtual meetings and continue to do what we're doing now with a little more technology. So those are both there for the board to review. I guess I would ask maybe a motion from the board. Do I need a motion, Stacy?
Well, you can have a motion to authorize you to make those requests of the township and the village. And just to clarify, you indicated it was reimbursement. We haven't made any purchases. We haven't budgeted for any of these items. These are items that would definitely help us in tending to the community with the COVID pandemic, things that haven't been budgeted for, and that's why it would fit the CARES Act criteria.
Yes, that is correct. It would be a reimbursement for a purchase not budgeted. So I'm just looking for approval from the board to go ahead and submit those 2 requests, and am willing to answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, let me
Mr.
try-
Chairman, I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Vest.
I have a question for legal. And I guess my question goes to the subrecipient agreement and the participation of the village individuals in doing so. We had problems in the past when we participated or did not participate in things, and I would think that it's probably best and prudent for us as village councilmen not to respond or to abstain from that portion. Perhaps we would interact with the townships, but not with the ones that are with the village.
I understand where you're coming from and the concern. We're not moving forward on that at this point.
Okay.
We are going to submit the letters, make the requests. Once that's approved by both the township and the village, I've indicated to Chief Baker, at that point, we're going to have a meeting and basically accept those funds like we would any other donation. And at that time, we will probably be accepting and approving the sub-recipient agreement. So at that time, that's when I believe that your concerns would need to be addressed.
Thank you. That's why I asked the question.
And the chief is made well aware that we have to have this purchased in-house by December 30th if you guys agree to go forward with the sub-granting.
And the chief and I discussed that at length today because we have to make the request for the purchase. So we basically have to purchase the items. So we'd have to, get approval from the township and the village. We as a board would have to approve those funds and authorize the chief to make the purchases. He'd have to make the purchases and we'd have to have delivery dates before December 30th. Then if for reasons beyond our control, it gets delayed and we don't receive it, then it's okay. But we have to at least plan on receiving those items by the end of the year. And that's why this is of time constraint and of pressing concern, because it's my understanding there may be like a 60-day lead time on delivery of those items at this point. So it's probably going to be necessary if the village or the township take action to acquiesce in these requests, then we're going to have a special board meeting to approve the purchases, accept the funds, and accept the sub-recipient agreements. So just so everyone's on the same page.
Which circles all the way back down to, do we need a workshop or a special meeting from an hour ago?
Yes.
So I guess we're looking for a motion approving sending the 2 letters to the 2 municipalities so that we can begin the process. And then potentially if the township were to pass, I think the village passed, correct, Mr. Vest?
That's correct.
Yeah.
So if the township were to pass at their next meeting, trying to expedite a special meeting, as Ms. Dame brought up. So it's kind of 2 asks.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Anders.
I'll make that motion for the letter to be sent.
I'll second.
Roll call.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mr. Lee.
before your roll call,
Yep.
I apologize. We had an emergency here at home. The document that's going to go to the township, I see has 31,000 for each of the life packs.
Yeah.
We can't get the same deal.
Mr. Chairman, can I reply?
Go ahead.
So using CARES money, we can augment our fleet so that we're better prepared to respond. You can't use CARES money as a replacement. So we can't replace something old with something new.
Okay.
So what we are going to do is we're going to expand and move cardiac monitoring into our first responder vehicles,
right,
to better equip us to respond to COVID-related emergencies.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
think we got a roll call.
Mr. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Gottner,
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Vest.
Yes.
And Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure if the board would like to set a meeting and optimistic either date, assuming that maybe the township would accept our letter and.
Well, I think
Well,
we're looking for that date anyways, right? For the workshop.
Yeah.
I don't have
Correct.
a calendar in front of me, so if someone's got a calendar, we go
I
ahead
do.
and set that up now.
Well,
Well-
Chief, we got a trustees meeting next Tuesday at noon. Ours is gonna be a virtual meeting. If you could get the letter to us before Tuesday at noon, we could take action then. And then we could schedule something, but based on what Stacy just said, we're gonna need a full board because like Mr. Wayman had to leave early tonight. You can't just have Mr. Anderson and I voting on the village,
Right.
purchase order and vice versa. We need all three village council members or the vote on the township purchase. So it may not, we're gonna have to make sure we have a full board.
Right.
So are you proposing a tentative time, what, next Wednesday at 7 o'clock?
My schedule's good then.
My schedule's good also.
So is mine.
I'm good with that.
Okay, so I guess, Todd, you got your wish.
And that would be where, is that the one we're gonna do at Station 2, or we're gonna do that one where we would look at the other issues too, or no?
If we call a special meeting plus workshop early, or say both, where it's a workshop and a special meeting, I think we could perform both duties at the same evening.
I agree, Mark.
Yep.
I would hope the special meeting would be short.
Oh, don't we all?
So that's going to be at Station 2 instead of virtual if we're going to do the workshop and everything?
Yeah, Station 2.
Okay.
7 p.m. Station 2.
In person, correct?
And that'd be the 28th of October.
Right, in person, correct?
In
Yes.
person
Okay,
Yeah.
at Station 2.
Bring your mask.
yeah.
Oh, yes.
We need
just
a motion,
clarify
Stacy,
what
to set that meeting, I would assume.
Yes.
I would think so. You have that motion,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Do we have a second?
Whoever, go ahead.
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. Gottner.
Always so much.
Roll call.
Mr. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson, Mr. Anderson, Mr.
We
Gottner,
lost her. Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Vest,
Yes,
Mr. Anderson.
I'm guessing he hit hang up instead of mute. I'll bet he'll-
Yeah, it said he left the meeting all of a sudden. He must have hit a wrong button.
Okay. Chief, anything else? It's your report.
No, I think we've gone through enough today. Thank you, Stacy, for reminding me, and thank you, board, for your attention to these details.
No problem.
Hey, Chief, just real quick, just for the public, just so they understand what we just spent 22,000 on the life pack for.
Yes.
Just explain what that is, what that helps you
So
with.
LifePak 15 is a cardiac monitor. It monitors your cardiac rhythm. It does EKGs that we can send directly to tertiary care centers such as Lake West Hillcrest, Geauga, so that we can take patients directly to a cardiac cath lab. It works off of telemetry, so basically it's sending all the information where it needs to go. It also monitors heart rate, blood pressure, your blood oxygen saturation. It monitors your end-tidal carbon dioxide when you breathe so that we can see how well your body's working. And it also looks for carbon monoxide. So in cases where maybe we don't suspect it, if carbon monoxide is present, it gives us a little indication. It's a very complex $22,000 piece of equipment. It's really the backbone to providing advanced life support.
Thank you. Anything else for the chief?
There's Max.
Max is back.
Hey, Mr. Anderson, anything else for the chief?
He's muted. You're muted, Max.
No, I don't have anything else.
Okay.
Max, were you a yes on moving the meeting or to the 28th? We doing roll call and we lost him.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
On the 28th, October 28th, at Station 2 at 7 o'clock, yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Have anything for the closing portion here from the public? We get anything in?
I have nothing, Mr. Chairman, from the public.
Same on the live stream. No questions.
Thank you. Okay, closing board comments. Anything from the board? All good? Okay. All right. Do we have a motion for adjournment?
I saw Max's lips moving.
Max's lips moved.
I thought, yeah, Mr. Anderson was one. Do we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Lee, second. Roll call.
Mr. Gottner,
Yes.
Mr. Lee,
Yes.
Mr. Vest,
Yes.
Mr. Adams,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Okay. It is 8:37 p.m. Next meeting, other than the special meeting, is going to be our regular meetings, November 18th, 2020, 7 p.m. And we're still going to be virtual at this point in time, just so everybody knows, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Good
night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Mrs. Dame,
Yes.
I would like some advice on the,
Hey, Nyla, stand by
Yes.
for 1 minute so we make sure that the live stream is ceased.
yes,